And when I say innocence was stolen, I don't. My mind always goes to sexual abuse or being molested or something like that. That's just a terrible act that happens to a child. But if you're raised in a home where the parents are using drugs or alcohol and you can't escape it, your innocence has been stolen. The first time that you watch a movie that's got cussing in it, your innocence gets stolen. If you have an older sibling and they listen to terrible music and you hear it when you're 7 years old, your innocence is stolen. If it doesn't matter if it's the moment in your life when you experience something that is not good for you and you can't stop it from happening to you. That's the moment that your innocence is stolen. And so let's say that you grow up in a household where there's use, drug use or whatever, and you can't escape it and you watch it happen and you see it happen. That's the moment that your innocence is stolen. But then let's say that you determine at some point that you're going to use the thing that you have seen in your home. Well, that's disobedience. And so what we do is we spend our whole life. Here's the next piece of shame. It's actually shame's best friend. So what we do is there's a moment where something happens in our life that we're not in control of, and that's the moment our innocence is stolen, and we become ashamed of it and we push it away. And then we spend the rest of our lives saying, I do what I'm doing today because of what happened. And the Lord showed me I was supposed to give this word 2 weeks ago tonight. And it was 2 days or 3 days after I was supposed to give it that the Lord showed me that there's something we come into agreement with when our innocence is stolen, and it causes us to never walk in freedom from it. And it's this. Who told you that you were naked? The man replied, it was the woman you gave me. And then the Lord asked the woman, what have you done? And she said, the serpent deceived me. He showed me that what happens when our innocence is stolen is in that moment we come into agreement with being the victim of something. And that's when the victimhood mindset slides just slippery, just straight into our lives. And for the rest of our lives, we can always we know why, and maybe we don't know why. Maybe we look and we look and we look and one day we find out why. But we do what we do because of what they did, because of how I was raised, because of the way my parents thought, because of what my friend did, because of whatever it is. We attach our behavior to the fact that someone did something, and that's called being a victim. I had never seen it before. I'm ashamed because of what I did, and I did what I did because of this. Whatever this is what you're victim to. And so and so victimhood is even it's it's so slippery. And the reason why I'm using the word slippery, I honestly don't know what other word to use, because you can't grab onto it. Like, unless someone tells you what I'm saying right now, I'm not sure how you, unless the Lord had shown me, I would have never come to the conclusion that I have been living my whole entire life as a victim to the things that happened to me when I was a kid. Even though that's how I've always talked about it. And then the Lord started showing me all the different relationships that I have, and what. So then there's an event, there's a wound, and in that moment, you know that you can be victimized and not come into agreement with victimhood? I didn't know that, but we can, and Jesus did it. It's the turn the other cheek stuff. At this point in my walk with the Lord, Lindsay and I, we do a lot of work with people who've been through stuff, because everybody's been through stuff, and sometimes they're really mean to us. And we've gotten to the point now to where we just don't take it personal, because we're not actually their problem. Their wound is whatever happened to them. That's their problem. We're just the people that they're taking their problem out on. So they can victimize us with their behavior, but we can not come into agreement with being their victim. And and so part of what we got to do is we got to come out of agreement with being victims, and that we were never the victim of that person. That person didn't do it The person did what they did because of them, not because of us. And so we get wounded and we come into agreement with victimhood. And then shame sits on top of victimhood. And because shame sits on top of victimhood and the wound and victimhood are together, then we actually never look at victimhood. And then we never look at the wound. And then what we put on top of shame is whatever wall of defense that we need to protect anybody from ever getting close enough to that shame and that wound to be for us to be exposed. Okay. And for me, it's anger and hate. And so if you start hurting me, then you're going to meet something that's angry and hateful. um, and that's what I used. I started using that at a really, really, really early age. And honestly, the reason why I use it is because I saw it being used in my house. And my dad was not an angry, hateful person. He didn't treat us that way. However, when he got really, really upset, that's what we saw. And so that was what I learned. I learned how to respond that way. I learned how to bottle things up and bottle things up and bottle things up until finally I couldn't handle it anymore. And then I explode with rage. And that's what I use to protect it because I don't want it to be seen, which is also what happened here. And that's the fear. So there's shame, there's victimhood, there's fear, and then there's your defense mechanism. That's all tied around the wound that happened in you where shame is residing. Shame's just hiding right in there. and so, and like, if you get close enough to those wounds in me, then I start getting upset. And that's what I do to keep something hidden because I'm afraid of being exposed. And that's what the Lord showed me on Sunday. So 2 weeks ago, I was supposed to talk on this, and he showed me something over the weekend. And last week, I was supposed to talk on this, and he showed me something Sunday morning. He showed me how badly I seek to be hidden when I'm feeling extremely vulnerable, and I don't like it. I don't like to be around people. I can't hide my emotions at all, and so I would rather just like isolate completely and just hide from everybody than be or even around people. Because if I'm around people, like my son knows, like, Dad, he goes, Dad, why's your face like that, Dad? Are you mad, Dad? Are you upset? I'm like, gosh, I can't even hide from him, and he's 5. Like, I can't. If I can't hide it from my son, like, I got no hope. Which it just leaves me vulnerable. It leaves me exposed. Like, it's just exposed. So what I can do is I can either isolate from everybody out of fear of exposure, or I can just be vulnerable and transparent. And so what I have is I have people in my life that I can just be completely vulnerable and transparent with. And so so the thing is if Satan can drive us to cover up our sin and hide our heart from God, then healing will never occur and the testimony will never develop. So that's the Lord is trying to heal us. The enemy is trying to keep us wounded as long as possible. Because the thing is a testimony is just a wound until the Lord gets a hold of it. Right. Because it's just a wound. A scar is not a wound. A scar is a healed wound. And so a scar is the evidence that something happened, but it got made whole. It's a really cool story, maybe it's not a cool story. I don't know, depending on what the wound is or what the scar is. But, I got this scar on my forehead. You can't see it because I'm so bald, but it's there. And I had it for a really long time, and it was really cool. My brother always told me, he's like, man, that scar looks cool, dude. Well, I was running under some stairs and I hit my head because I didn't duck low enough. That was the story. It's not even cool at all. But it's a scar. There was a wound there and it healed. And the enemy wants us to just be wounded as long as humanly possible. And so he just heaps on shame and he heaps on condemnation. And the thing is depending on what your wound's attached to, if it's attached to habitual sin, then not only does the wound remain, but so does the habitual sin until you expose it. And depending on what the habitual sin is, that sin itself may be so shameful, like like sexual sin. I went to Liberty University and got a degree there, which, whatever, cost a lot of money, learned some cool stuff. moving on. But one of the classes I took was on sexual addiction, and they talked about how much shame is attached to sexual addiction, and how I think it was like 95% of people who confess sexual addiction will never confess everything about it because it's so shameful. Which is also why the Lord cautions us so bad. Like, of all the sin, don't do this one. Don't do this one. Don't stay away from sexual immorality because you're sinning against yourself. And it just eats us up because it's so intimate and it's so vulnerable. Sex is so vulnerable and so intimate. And it's just, we're becoming one, literally one with an individual. And that's why it's so shameful. So it's time to it's not let the enemy have the wound. We've been doing that. It's time to let the Lord have the wound. So we're going to look at a couple of verses. We're going to look at 1 John chapter 4. And I'm about to find out what verse. It's written down. It is written down. What? Why didn't I underline it? It's here. It's right here. 1 John, this is chapter 1, verse 9. And we're gonna talk. So we just talked about shame and the truth about shame and how the enemy uses shame. And the thing is he uses everybody. He uses this against everybody. It's